There is a fear that arrives in a narcissist's life at almost the exact moment the light starts leaving the room. And it is a fear you were never once allowed to see. For most of their life, they were the brightest thing in every room they entered. People turned toward them the way plants turn toward a window. Then, slowly, the room stops turning, and something they buried decades ago begins walking back across the floor toward them, long and getting longer, the way a shadow does in the last hour before dark. Carl Jung gave both halves of this a name. He said every human life has a morning and an afternoon, and that the exact strategy that wins you the morning will quietly destroy you in the afternoon, if you never learn to put it down. The aging narcissist is the purest case of that failure psychology has ever recorded. They win the morning so completely that they never build a single thing for the dark. You already know the morning version of them. You lived under that light. What you never got to watch was the afternoon. That's what this is. Forget the clinical breakdown of how narcissism works. This is a look at the exact thing they feel as their power fades, the part they would rather die than say out loud, the part you were made to carry so they'd never have to. Before we go into the dark with them, subscribe. We do this every week. Because here is what Jung understood that the narcissist never could. The self they showed you was never actually a self. Jung called it the persona, the mask, the face you build to meet the world. Everyone has one. Yours is the version of you that answers work emails and stays polite at the dentist. Healthy people wear the mask and then take it off. They know the difference between the face and the person behind it. The narcissist did something else. They moved in. They built their entire identity out of the mask and let everything behind it starve. There was no one home behind the face because the face was the whole house, and it needed an audience the way a fire needs air. And for years they had one. They were charming, magnetic, the person everyone quoted in the car on the way home. It worked. That's the part people always leave out. It genuinely worked. The persona is a young person's weapon. It runs on novelty, on beauty, on the raw electricity of being new in a room. And when you are 30 and luminous, the room pays every time. You remember the entrances, the way heads lifted when they walked in, the way you felt quietly chosen just standing inside that light. But a weapon that only fires while people are watching has a countdown wired into it from the start. And the narcissist never once heard it ticking. Watch what that same weapon does at 70. The charm is still there, worn like a jacket that used to fit. But the room has seen this act before. The story that landed like lightning in 1990 gets told for the 40th time to people checking their phones under the table. The flirtation that used to open doors now makes a young waiter go still and polite and desperate to leave. Nothing about their performance changed. The audience did, and a performer who can't feel the room emptying just performs harder. Louder stories, bigger claims, more names dropped into a silence that used to be applause. That is the first crack, and it's a strange one. The mask never broke. It kept working perfectly. The world simply stopped rewarding it. They are running a flawless key in a lock that somebody changed. Here's the cost underneath it that nobody names. To become nothing but the shining mask, they had to get rid of everything in themselves that didn't shine. Jung had a word for that too. The shadow. It's every part of yourself you can't stand to look at, so you shove it underground and pretend it was never yours. The neediness, the fear, the smallness, the plain, unremarkable human parts that don't photograph well and don't win rooms. The narcissist carries the largest shadow of anyone alive because they exhaled the most. To keep the mask flawless, they had to bury every ordinary weakness so deep they lost the map back to it. And that is an enormous amount of weight to hold down. Nobody can hold it alone. So they handed it to you. This is the part you felt in your body for years without ever having a word for it. When you were with them, you were somehow always the anxious one, the needy one, the too much one, the one who couldn't cope. That was not an accident, and it was not you. You were holding their shadow. Every part of themselves they refused to feel. They poured into you, and then pointed at you as the source of it. Jung called this projection. You lived it as exhaustion. For years you carried a weight that was never yours, and you buckled, and you decided the buckling meant you were weak. It meant nothing of the kind. You were loaded down with a second person's buried self and told the strain was your personality. Now hold on to that weight, because this entire story turns on one question. What happens to it when they can no longer find anybody to carry it for them? To see that, you have to understand where their light was actually coming from, because it was never coming from inside them. A healthy person generates their own charge. They can sit alone in a quiet house, with nobody watching and nothing happening, and still know they exist. The narcissist cannot do that, and never could. The self they built has no internal power source. It runs entirely on other people's attention, the way a screen with a dead battery only lights up while it is plugged into the wall. Jung called the swollen version of this inflation the ego blown up far past its true size on borrowed energy, feeling godlike for exactly as long as the supply keeps flowing. Admiration is the current. Fear works just as well. Envy, attention, the electricity of being the biggest thing in someone else's life. All of it feeds the same hunger. And for the whole morning of their life, that supply is everywhere. They are desirable, so people chase. They are powerful, so people gather. They are new, so people look. The plug is always in the wall, and they mistake the wall's electricity for their own. Then the afternoon comes for the supply first. The looks that opened every door start to go. Retirement quietly takes the title that made them matter at every dinner table. The younger crowd stops seeing a legend and starts seeing an old person telling the same 3 stories. The people they discarded went off and built whole lives that have no room in them. Their children, if they had any, learned a long time ago to stop calling first. The phone that used to buzz all evening goes quiet in a way that has actual weight to it. And a self that only lights up when it's plugged in is now sitting in a room where not one person is holding the cord. That silence is the very first thing they feel. Clean sadness would require equipment they never built. What comes instead is static, the specific rising dread of a person who is disappearing in real time and has no idea how to stop it. Picture the birthday that used to fill a house. Now it's a table set for 12 with 5 people at it, and 2 of those are there out of pure duty, watching the clock. They tell the big story anyway, the one that used to own the whole room, and it lands in a soft, tired silence. A couple of polite nods, someone quietly refilling a water glass, and for 1 second, something crosses their face you would never have seen on them 20 years ago. Confusion. The look of a person whose one reliable trick just failed in front of witnesses. Then it's gone, papered over with a louder joke. But you'd have caught it. The mask slipped for a single frame, and what was under it was just a frightened old person wondering where everybody went. And then you watch them start reaching backward. Because when there is no new supply, the aging narcissist goes hunting through the old. A text arrives from a number you deleted years ago. An email that opens with how much they've changed, how much they've been reflecting, how they always knew you were the special one. They are not sorry. They ran out of new sockets, so they came back to plug the dead mask into an old one. You. Dr. Ramani Durvasula, who has spent decades studying this exact pattern, describes how narcissism tends to curdle rather than soften with age. The charm has less to work with, so the tactics get barer, more transparent, more desperate. You can see the string on the puppet now. That message that would have wrecked you at 30 just makes your stomach turn at 50, because you can finally see the empty hand reaching, not the God who once held you. They came back for the same reason a stranded phone lights up any charger it can find. Pure need. Pure current. Whatever that hunger is, it was never anything close to love. And when reaching backward fails, they reach for the one story that still pulls a crowd. They become the victim. This is the shadow's final disguise, and it is almost elegant. The person who caused the wreckage of every relationship they ever had now sits in the fading light and rewrites the whole thing. They were the one who was abandoned. They were the one nobody appreciated. They gave and gave to ungrateful people who left. Every discard they engineered becomes a betrayal that was done to them. Watch for the pivot to the body, too. Suddenly there are ailments, emergencies, a running catalogue of symptoms that need to be managed and witnessed and dropped everything for. Illness becomes the last reliable supply line, because a sickbed still makes people come, still makes them soften, still makes them look. If the world won't gather for the God, it will gather for the patient. And whoever stayed, the exhausted spouse, the one adult child who never fully got out, gets it worst of all now. As the audience shrinks, the cruelty concentrates. There are fewer people left to absorb the shadow, so the ones remaining carry a heavier and heavier load. Here is the cruel part underneath the theatrics. On some level, they experience their own buried self clawing back up. The fear, the smallness, the need, and they cannot recognize it as theirs. So they feel it as the world turning on them. The shadow is coming home, and they call it everyone else's cruelty. For a long time, they still had lieutenants, the friends who took their side, the relatives who repeated their version, the ones who called you the difficult one for leaving. Every narcissist runs a small court like this, and it was never loyalty. It was a set of mirrors, angled to keep throwing the mask's light back at them. But a court needs a king with something left to hand out. As the power fades, the payroll fades with it. The loyalists drift, one at a time, toward people who can still do something for them. The smear campaign that once turned a whole family against you keeps running. Except now, it plays to an empty theater. They are still talking. Fewer and fewer people are still listening. And a story told about you to no one is just an old person arguing with a room that emptied out years ago. And then there is the thing that comes for them in the smallest hours. The one Jung would say the persona was always secretly running from. Death. Not just dying, but being erased. A person with an inner life can face the end holding what they built inside, the love given, the people truly known, a self that was real. The narcissist built none of that. All they have is the record, the achievements, the reputation, the monument of the name. So they clutch at legacy with both hands. Suddenly it matters, intensely, how they will be remembered, who inherits, whose version survives them. Because if the persona doesn't outlive the body, then nothing of them was ever really here. And under the whole scramble sits the suspicion they can never say out loud, that a mask, however brilliant, leaves behind nothing but the shape of the empty space it was filling. And this is where Jung's entire map of a human life comes down on them like weather. He said the morning of life is for building the ego, the career, the status, the mask, the conquest. That is exactly right, and the narcissist is world-class at it. But he said the afternoon is for the opposite motion in every direction, turning inward, facing the shadow, making some kind of peace with being ordinary and mortal and small, becoming, at last, a whole person instead of a performance. Jung called that lifelong turn individuation, and he was blunt that you do not get to skip it. The afternoon of life, he said, has its own meaning, and it is not the meaning of the morning. Everyone gets walked to that door. Everyone. The gentle grandmother and the monster arrive at the very same threshold, where the world stops rewarding the mask and asks quietly, "Who are you when nobody is applauding?" Most people can answer, badly, partially, with a shaking voice. But they can answer, because somewhere along the way they built a small inner life. A marriage that actually knows them, a faith, a memory of being loved for nothing in particular, some private self that was never once for sale. And for the ordinary person, this turn can feel less like a punishment than a release. The pressure to perform finally lifts. You stop auditioning. You get to be plain and loved anyway, and let the mask hang by the door, because the people around you already know the face underneath and stayed for it. That is what the afternoon is actually for, trading the exhausting brightness of being admired for the quiet warmth of being known. Nearly everyone gets some version of that, if they let themselves have it. The narcissist arrives at that door with empty hands. Jung had a phrase for the life they lived instead, the provisional life, always deferring the real thing, always treating right now as the warm-up, the audition, the version that doesn't count yet, while the true life waits somewhere up ahead. Except the narcissist deferred it so completely, for so long, that the true life never got built at all. There was always another room to win first. So when the afternoon finally asks them to turn inward, there is nothing on the inside to turn toward. They kept running the morning program straight into the dark, the same charm, the same conquest, the same performance, while fewer and fewer people showed up to watch it. That is the loneliest thing a human being can be, an emptiness on the inside that a full room only makes louder. And the cruelest detail is that the door never actually locks. Jung believed the turn inward is possible at any age. A person can begin facing the shadow at 70 as truly as at 30. In theory, it is never too late for them. In practice, it almost always is. Because taking that turn demands the one act the entire structure was built to make impossible. Admitting the mask was a lie. Admitting there's a frightened, ordinary, dependent self under there, and that there always was. For anyone else, that admission is humbling. For them, it feels like dying. So they choose the dark instead, again and again, right to the end. There is one specific feeling underneath every bit of this, the one they would never say out loud, and it is where we are going now. But you have to see one last thing first, because it's the thing that makes the ending inevitable. Everything they buried has been waiting for them the entire time. Jung's warning about the shadow was not a soft one. He said whatever you refuse to make conscious in yourself does not vanish. It waits underground, and it comes back around later wearing the mask of your fate, and you will swear the world did it to you. You call it bad luck. You call it everyone abandoning you for no reason. You never once call it the bill arriving. For the narcissist, the bill comes due in the afternoon, and it comes all at once. Every ounce of vulnerability they refused to feel, Every moment of shame they outsourced to you. Every ordinary human terror of being unlovable, unremarkable, forgotten. All of it held under water for 60 years, surfaces at the same time. The dependence they mocked in weaker people is now theirs to live inside. The neediness they called pathetic is now the loudest thing in the room. The smallness they could not survive feeling for a single second is now simply the fact of their situation. And here is the part that is almost too clean to be real. The people who used to carry that shadow for them are gone. You are gone. You learned. The supply is gone. There is no one left in the room to hand the weight to. So for the first time in their entire life, they have to hold their own shadow, alone, with no tools, no practice, and no self underneath, sturdy enough to survive it. The sun is sitting right on the horizon now, and that is exactly the hour your shadow stretches out longest across the ground. Darkest, sharpest, impossible to outrun, right at the end of the day. So what do they actually feel? Let me name it precisely, because vague words are the exact fog they always used to get away with everything. It is not remorse. Do not sit up at night waiting for remorse. It requires a capacity for self-reflection they amputated at 20. What they feel is terror. The specific animal terror of being ordinary, of discovering decades too late that the mask was hiding nothing at all. That there was never a great person underneath. Only a frightened one who never once grew up. They feel unwitnessed, which for them lands somewhere very close to not existing. Being seen was oxygen, and the audience has quietly filed out of the building. They feel a rage that has nowhere to land, at their own body for aging, at the young for holding what they lost, at a world that stopped clapping and never even told them why. And underneath all of it, in the part they will carry to the grave without ever saying a word, they feel the particular loneliness of a person who slowly, expertly, taught every single human being in their life how to leave them. And who now, in the quiet, half suspects that it was them all along. And cannot bear to finish that thought, because there is no one left to hand it to. That is the feeling. That is the thing behind the door they spent an entire life keeping shut. And here is what it means for you. The discard that nearly ended you was not them winning. It was them handing you their shadow because they could not hold it for one more second. You were their storage. You were the place they put every part of themselves they could not survive knowing about. The reason their old age is unbearable is brutally simple. They finally have to carry that weight themselves, and you already know how, and they never learned. You did the hard thing decades early. The pain they put you through forced you to turn and face your own shadow while you were still young enough to grow around it. You had your afternoon in your 20s, or your 30s, in the wreckage they left. They are having theirs at the very end, with no light left to see by. All that power they held over you was borrowed, a loan taken out against a debt that is coming due right now, in a quiet room, with the phone face down and silent, and no one left to pay it down for them. So if you have been waiting for their reckoning, stop watching the door for it. It already started. It just doesn't look the way you pictured justice looking. It looks like an aging person in a dimming room, running a mask that stopped opening locks, feeling a shadow they spent a whole lifetime insisting they didn't have. You do not have to forgive them for any of this to be true. You do not have to feel a thing for them. You only have to understand that the wound they gave you was them offloading a weight they always knew. Somewhere underneath, they would one day have to bend down and pick up alone. Your body remembers what your mind spent years trying to forget. The heaviness you lived under was never yours to begin with. It went home with them. It has been waiting for them at the bottom of the afternoon this entire time. You already walked through the dark. That is the whole reason you are the one who came out the other side of it whole. If any of this finally put language to something you have carried for years and never had the words for, subscribe. This is the exact work we do here, every single week. Now tell me one thing in the comments. When you pictured them in that fading, silent room, what actually rose up in you? Relief or grief that it took this long? Just leave the one word, relief or grief. That single word tells me more about where you are in this than a whole paragraph would, and I read every one of them. And if you know someone still bracing themselves for a reckoning they think has to arrive loud to count, send them this. It might be the first time anyone has shown them that it was already happening, quietly, in the dark, the whole time. The light is leaving their room. It is coming back into yours. That was always, from the very first day, the direction this was going to go.